This is Peggy Anne Salz. This is Business of Apps, and this is an opportunity to delve into some of the changes that have really rocked the industry. I'm talking about consent, and I'm talking about consent with Owen Seymour, who is a BizDev rep at UserCentrics. First of all, great to have you here and to have you sharing. And we were talking before we started recording about what is going on out there. You know, we thought it was going to be, when you speak with marketers, it was a source of fear. It was, oh, this is going to have a negative impact. This is going to hurt my opt-in rates or just make life more difficult. But you work in this industry, you work with them. What have you actually seen?
With the passing of Google consent mode back in March, we definitely saw that there was an uptick in interest, or not interest, but a need for consent management for both websites and apps. And at this point, such as it is with GDPR, it's a need. So it's more a matter of who you want to go with when it comes to what you have in place. So a lot of people, as you said, are very worried about losing opt-in rates because, of course, you need opt-in rates to monetize what data you're getting from your users. So the higher the opt-in rates, the better you're performing and the happier everyone is. So for us, that's one thing we really focus on. So with our tool, because it's so customizable with how you can set it up with the layout, the banner, and the colors, you can really make it look like your own and not look like some third-party tool. And that really helps build the trust between your brand and the users coming to your app. And we've seen an opt-in rate of about 90% with our SDK, which is incredibly high for a tool like this. And we've definitely seen that with this uptick in interest because of the Google consent mode. A lot of people are now more aware about, why it's important to have, and they're now taking more steps towards actually managing user consent in a proper way.
First of all, it's not a need, it's forced. So this is it, it or not. And marketers didn't like it at first, but what I'm hearing from you is what they do like is it can look like the rest of the app. The customizable point is really important. What are some of the best practices or ways that you're able to customize, or that you've seen app publishers customizing this to get the high opt-in rates? I mean, as much as 90%, that's going to be the high level. But, an average is probably going to be around
maybe
what?
70%, maybe 80%. So yeah, I would definitely say playing around with the colors and the fonts because again, it's all about making it look like it's something that your company is putting out there. If you see something that looks out of place and like it's from a third party, you're not going to really trust it when you go to that brand. You're going to be like, okay, this is clearly someone else who wants my data. And in the end, that's true no matter if it looks customized or not. It is someone else. But you, as a company, that's not really your concern. Your concern is building trust with the users to get them to opt in. And I would also say that providing them the ability to choose what they want, what type of data they want of theirs to be tracked, and what type of data they don't want to be tracked is also something that really empowers the user to not only have control over that, but also to be more aware of who actually has access to their data. Because it's a trend now where maybe 5-6 years ago, no one really cared about who has access to their personal data. And we've seen that change, of course, with GDPR. And then you have other frameworks like CCPA in the US. You have LGBT in Brazil. And this is not a trend that's going to stop here. It's going to keep growing and growing. And more companies and countries are going to have to implement things very similar to consent banners. So this is definitely not something that's just a flash in the pan in terms of industry trends. This is only going to increase in size.
And I remember reading some research maybe 2 years ago that said what the thought was. I think it was McKinsey, but don't quote me on it. But the whole idea was showing that you are managing data is going to be like this conversation that goes on that says, you know what? I'm taking care of this. I'm aware of this. I'm taking care of it. And then in your own brand and colors and the look and feel of the app, that just makes this another way to have a conversation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it all comes back to trust, because we all have brands that we like to come back to and use time and time again. And it's the ones that we trust. It's not the ones that we see and we think like, okay, maybe they're doing this for me, or maybe they're just doing it for themselves. So I think that's one thing where maybe it's not as quantifiable as, say, an opt-in rate or how much you make from the monetization, but it's a very important factor to consider when you're a company and you're putting your brand out there, whether it's on a website or on an app. You want people to trust you and to feel like you actually care about them, not only because of the business that they're going to give you, but also the time and effort they give in telling you what they want.
Do you have any numbers or insights into what customers are doing more perhaps with publishers because they trust them? In other words, trying to understand that paying attention to this part of the user experience, building trust, being trustworthy, and not looking sort of dodgy when you ask for this consent in the first place, that has an impact on the relationship, on whatever that might be. That might be an uplift in time in the app, or purchase, or loyalty, or something. Is there some way that you're quantifying that? Because I happen to know UserCentrics, because of your German roots, if there's something you do, it's quantify.
We all know that Germans absolutely love rules. They love sticking to the steps and the process in these things, whether it's with GDPR or whether it's now with the Google consent mode. They're very meticulous in how they do what they do. In terms of numbers, I don't think I can really or have anything that I can say that would quantify how these companies are doing this. But I would say that one of the ways that we also help to, let's say, emphasize the trust that brands are trying to give to their end users is that we make it so that when you go in, you give consent, you can give consent at a very granular level, which means that you can actually choose specific SDKs or specific trackers that you want on and off. So let's say you're someone who absolutely hates Google, all right? You don't want Google to track your data at all. You can still opt out of Google, but still keep everything else that's analytics or tracking or marketing active. And I think, while maybe that's not a majority of the people out there who, are going to give consent, you still have like a small percentage that, really, really are passionate and care about how their data is managed. And again, I think that goes back to the fact that it's a German company, and Germans it doesn't matter how small or finite of a detail it is. If it can be included, they'll include it.
It's interesting, though, that you can have different flavors of consent. So I can say, I consent to this, but, like one thing I really hate is sort of the location consent, because then you're going to start getting, things relative to where you are. And I don't want to really be bothered with an offer just because I happen to be on the street. So I can turn that on and off, is what you're telling me. I can choose the level of what I consent to. And that's going to be something that's managed by the publisher and by your system.
And I also live in a country where, I don't necessarily need ads that are targeted for someone who is like from that country. Because as a foreigner in that country, I'm sort of taking in all the different types of information at once. So maybe something that's not as important to me, I don't need them to, collect information about me for those purposes. So having that ability to switch it on and off. And again, this is something that, a very small niche of people, actually really care about. But I think that's still important to include those small niche groups as well, because then if you're getting their traffic and you're getting also the majority of people, that's just more and more opt-ins, that's more and more people who trust your brand. And at the end of the day, I don't think you can underestimate or undervalue those groups.
It's a lot of extra stuff to manage. It's not great for a small publisher in particular, but on the other hand, it also prepares a publisher to have other conversations, because you can say to brands or other companies that care about safety, trust, all of that, I can be a part of that partnership with you. I can be a good partner. I'm certainly paying attention to these details. So it was a way of saying, yeah, I can start talking business.
I mean, on the one hand, it did create, I would say, let's say, more work for the companies, but I think in the end that work is going to pay off in a lot of ways. And it all comes back to the trust that you're building with your consumer. So I think even though it might be more work right now, I think you'll see down the road more and more people, they might not even know that this is the reason why these companies are, required to have these consent banners on their apps and on their websites. But I think down the road, you'll see that more and more people will appreciate this.
Games companies, when they want to really partner with brands, they have to prove that they are walking the talk, that they are paying attention to privacy first.
Of course, and that is, again, that's still data that they're able to get about who's on their app and what they're interested in. So you'll see if people are, let's say, opting out of certain things, that tells you about who these people are and whether they're very sensitive about their data, whether they're very casual and open with their data. So at the end of the day, I don't think you can really put a price on what data you get from the people who, come to your company, that come to your app. So I think you're still providing them with something that, they're able to use, and they can optimize their business to keep growing. So I think in the end, there's always something to be gained from something like this.
I'm curious because when we were all talking about this before March, it was, how are we going to ask for permission? When are we going to ask for permission? We know what it's going to look like because it'll be the look and feel of my app. But do you have some best practices, some observations? You're working with so many customers about asking, how not to ask, when to ask, where to ask, not just the look and feel of the ask.
So one thing we were just talking about today with someone who came to our stand is how certain companies, when they, show their banner, they can, of course, display any text that they want to display. And it's always coming up on that first page, like, here's what this banner is about, and here's the information that we're going to gather. And one interesting thing that they brought up is that some companies, they use, let's say, more technical legal jargon. So it's very, and you can probably guess this might be a German company that might be doing this. They're very, let's say they're not as, let's say, fun with their language that they use. But then, companies that, let's say, their targeted audiences, families, or, maybe young people, they're going to use language that's a little bit more easy to understand and digest. And I think, that's, again, a way of optimizing who you're going to target and how you're going to target them, and also to educate them on what it is that you're doing. So I think that's something that can also really be optimized as well. It's like how you are educating the people who are coming to your app and saying, this is why we're going to collect your data, or this is how we're doing it. And here's how you can, how you can control that and manage that, which I think is very empowering for them. And it's also, again, coming back to trust, a nice way of building a nice relationship between yourself and your customer.
And it doesn't have to be yet another thing to A/B test. I mean, you do have some best practices, some models, some approaches to share as well. Am I correct?
I do think that that having that ability for, like you said, with A/B testing, I mean, that's probably like one of the most essential tools that any marketing type of technology can have, is the ability to see what works better. And I think that's also one of the things that stands out about our tool, is that having that ability to see, like, all right, I'm trying this here and I'm trying that here, which one is working better. We also don't make this so that everyone who comes and will use this app has to see the same thing. So for example, if you have someone coming from California, they don't need to see something that's that's for someone in the EU. They don't care about GDPR, and so it's not a need for them. So you can optimize the tool in that way as well. So you can really break it down so that each user group that you're trying to target is seeing only what they need to see. And again, I think that is very special, because a lot of tools, they'll just have one thing, everyone sees it. And so while it might apply to, a majority of them, you have other people who are like, why am I seeing this? So I think when you break it down, having that, that way to target them is also going to really have a positive impact on the results you see.
Do publishers have a second chance? If they ask me in a certain way and I say no, can they ask me again later in a different way?
In certain cases that, for example, you see this on like a website where they're able to ask you for consent again. And I'm not entirely sure if it's 1 year or for 2 years. So but it's within a certain amount of time you are able to ask for consent again. But also what's nice is that the way we have our tool is that if someone, I don't know, let's say was feeling nice and they wanted to go back and change their consent preferences because they did want to receive like, you know, targeted ads, or they did want to get information from like the marketing team and things like that, they're able to go back in and adjust their consent choices so that, you know, you'll see that if you're gaining their trust, they will give you their trust. So I think that's also one of the nice parts too, is that it's not set in stone. Once they say no, it's no forever. There's always the ability to win them back. But, you know, that's something that the company, of course, needs to do, and they need to build that trust. So we're not making it so it's just, you know, super simple for the company. There is work that needs to be done, but when the work is done, like, we make it so that it can happen.
That's pretty cool if you think about it, because you could say, hey, you've just had a great experience, rather than say, hey, go to the App Store and give me a 5-star. It's like, no, you've had a great experience and it was good for everyone, and I paid attention to your privacy. So go in, change your settings, give me a little bit more love, perhaps. That's really interesting. Well, Owen, learned a lot, and above all, also some learnings from you as well. So I think it was a great combination. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Peggy.
Oh, okay. You're on.